Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 81, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is early Friday, October 25th, and I am in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal.
Decided it was time for me to live with the hardest part is trying. They say you either get busy with living or get busy dying. You see, there's only one me and I'ma be who I'm supposed to be. Nobody said it would be easy. See, I was never given much, I wanna take that too. But everybody gets a chance to what you gotta do. Can nobody take it from me? You make me wanna quit. You only get one life, no matter what, you gotta live it.
We ain't afraid to die. We ain't afraid of life. If the world is gonna end, you know that I'm bringing all my friends. 'Cause we ain't afraid to die. A little bit of Not Afraid to Die by P.O.D. this morning. Off their project released earlier this year entitled Veritas, which is throwback P.O.D. Sounds a lot like their 90s albums. Good morning and happy Friday, my tools, my babies, my people. We are at the weekend. We have made it. It is a beautiful day. The birds are chirping. The air is crisp and cool. The skies are clear and so is my mind. Let's jump into some news. The wife and I took our 2 kids last night to a little trunk or treat event down the street at the public library. It's spooky season, my babies. Not yet Thanksgiving, not yet Christmas, despite what the department stores may have you believe, it is spooky season. So, they threw on some costumes, we went down to the trunk or treat to eat some hot dogs and play some games and get some candy that my wife and I enjoyed when our babies were sleeping. Don't deny you do it, parents. It's the whole purpose and we all know it. And we get there and the line is wrapped around the block. I mean, everybody has come out for this trunk or treat, okay? Small town Alabama at its finest. And we're waiting in line. The line's moving slowly like at Disneyland. We start inching forward. And my 4-year-old, big man, stops dead in his tracks. His eyes were the size of coconuts, as big as the ones from that tree that Kamala Harris says that she did not fall out of. Okay. And I look to see what it is that has the boy so shook. so terrified. And it's a man on stilts. There is a man walking toward us through the crowd, entertaining the people, and he's about 12 to 15 feet tall. His face is painted white like a mime. He's got one of them fuzzy hats with a little ball on top of it. He's a clown, a very tall, very thin clown. It's not normal for my boy to get so terrified at things. He's not really much of a fraidy cat. He is a risk taker, okay? And so I say to him, buddy, what are you doing? We've got to move forward in the line. We've got to go get our candy. And he says, Daddy, don't make me go toward that giant. He thought it was a real life giant. You see, he's only 4 years old. When it comes to the earth, he hadn't been here long, okay? And he loves comic books and superheroes and fairy tales and fables, so he thought he was facing down a literal giant. And he didn't have a sling and some smooth stones, so he didn't want any part of it, okay? As we're trying to coax him and convince him none of my arguments are working on his 4-year-old logic, he is not budging or moving a step forward. And then we run into some of our family friends, some of our friends from church, husband and wife paired that have their daughter along with them. They're leaving the event that we are trying to enter. They come over to talk to us, and realizing what's going on, the mom bends down and looks my son in the eye and says, that's just a clown. He's only as tall as your dad, if not smaller. He's standing on some really tall sticks. He's not a giant. And he's actually pretty funny. He's pretty nice. He was giving out candy to the kids. Don't you want to go get some candy? And his entire demeanor changed. The fear dissipated quicker than your bowels after some late night Taco Bell, okay? With fire sauce. He was fine after that. He talked to the clown. We were in line and the clown came by and he yelled at him, Hey clown! Hey clown! The fear was gone. And it was a simple reminder to me of how important it is as parents to have a village around you. To have people in your life and in the lives of your children who are not related to you, but who are like family. Who can look your kids in the eye, who can speak truths to them, who could convince them of what is good and what is right and what is pure, of their safety, of logic and common sense, who can relate to them on their level besides mom and dad, who can help them overcome their fear. And I know it's a silly example. I know that it's a funny story, kind of comical to see his reaction when he came face to face with the giant. But I'm glad I have people in my life who are backing me up and who are telling my children the things that your dad is saying, the things your mom is saying. Those things are right. You're okay. You're going to do well. You're fine. People who are encouraging them, who are lifting them up, who are pouring into them. It's vitally important that you have those people, that your children have those people, and I'm thankful that we do, and I hope you do as well. All right, let's take a look at our weekly presidential election breakdown. This stuff is changing on a daily basis right now. According to all the so-called experts, this is the closest presidential race in quite some time. And once a week on this show, and on the app formerly known as Twitter, where you can find us at In The Shed 4, we give you our prognostication. We take a look at all of the polls, the betting odds, the algorithms, the trends, the headlines, and try to call balls and strikes. Try to give you an idea of what's going on right now. And this is our best guess of where things stand today. With less than 2 weeks to go before voting day, I currently see it like this. I have former President Trump receiving 281 electoral votes to 257 for Vice President Harris. The difference of 2 states, with Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia being 3 states that are important to watch. All right, enough of that. Let's get to this. Some comments and corrections from our last show. Our humble little show is being listened to across the globe, 68 countries in total and counting. We haven't added a new one in a little while. We are, of course, being listened to all over this great country of ours, all 50 states, but we're still continuing to grow in popularity worldwide, somehow. Our top 10 nations based on listening audience currently looks like this. The US still is in front, making up 54% of our audience, followed by India, Canada at number 3, the UK making waves at number 4. A lot of downloads in the UK this week. Singapore is at number 5. France is now at number 6, and you've got a ways to go, France, before you catch Singapore. I'm just saying. Australia has surpassed China. Australia is now in the 7th position. I told you it was coming. It's happened. China is at number 8, Mexico at number 9, and Germany still edging out Malaysia for the final spot in our top 10. I want to give a special shout out to our 7 new listeners in the nation of Chad this week. Assalamu alaikum, Chad. We're currently averaging more listeners per episode than ever before. Still true thanks to you. We're still adding followers over on X. You can find us there at In The Shed 4. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at In The Shed with Wes Anderson 6670. Please support the show by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. We really need you to do that. If you could take just a moment out of your day and leave us a 5-star review, it would help us in the algorithms tremendously. By sharing the show with a friend, word of mouth is still how we grow. And by joining our membership club at patreon.com/intheshed4. You can donate as little as $1 or subscribe to exclusive content for as little as $4 a month. And that's a cup of coffee. If you keep supporting the show, I'll keep bringing you the news. If you subscribe, like, share, and review, we'll keep growing this thing together. We got a great show for you today, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Elizabeth from Ontario, Canada, aka America's Top Hat. Wes, you say you don't do character assassination on your show, but continue to impugn and degrade Brian Stelter. You are a fraud. Look, I told you if you write into the show, I will read it on air. Even if you disagree with me, or think like Elizabeth from Ontario does that I am a fraud. Elizabeth, I think you must be new here. Maybe you've only listened to a couple episodes of the show. This is a tongue-in-cheek news show, okay? We do things differently. We give you the news and let you decide for yourself. We are honest, we keep it a buck with you, but hey, we make jokes. We make light of situations. And to me, Brian Stelter being brought back to CNN is something to make light of. I don't think that he's a serious newsman. That is my opinion. If you have a different one, you're still welcome here. But that's my opinion, and I shared it in a way that I find comical. By calling a human being a potato and comparing him to Shamu the whale. Not because of his size, but because of his smugness. We don't do character assassination on the show, but we do have fun. And we take some artistic liberties. Thank you for listening and writing into the show. Elizabeth, hang in there. If that was offensive, hang in there. Buckle up, Canada. Our next email comes from Ali from Bangladesh. Hey, our first email to the show from the nation of Bangladesh. Welcome into the shed. Ali says, I listen to your show. It's how I know what's going on in America. And that might not be the best route to take, Ali. Please understand, Ali, my guy, that even though I am in fact a journalist, I am a guy in the backyard of his home in Alabama, sitting in his shed, first thing in the morning, drinking his coffee and talking about the news. I'm going to give you some stories that you don't hear elsewhere. I'm going to tell you what's going on. We're going to chop it up. We're going to talk politics, sports, and paranormal. If you enjoy it, then fantastic. I'm glad that you are here. Please keep listening. But I don't know that this should be how you gauge what's going on in America. Ali. And finally, Jermaine from Atlanta, Georgia asks, Jermaine from Atlanta, Georgia, Jermaine Dupree? Is that who? Welcome to Atlanta. Is that who we have in the shed today? I don't know. But maybe. Wes, what are your expectations from our Hawks this season? A lot of losses, Jermaine. What I expect is a lot of losses. We still have Trae Young. We have some promising young talent and athleticism on the roster. I'm glad that we gave up on the Trae Young and DeJounte Murray experiment that was not working out. But honestly, I expected more when Quinn Snyder was hired as head coach. He's looked pretty good as an NBA head coach. He's an exceptional basketball mind, especially on the offensive end. I thought that the ball movement would improve dramatically under his tutelage, and it hasn't happened. Partly because Trae Young is such a ball-dominant guard, even though he's a good passer. But the main thing holding us back is not talent. It's not offense. We all know it's on the defensive end. Atlanta the last couple of seasons has regressed tremendously on defense, and it's been one of the worst defensive basketball teams that I've seen since middle school. I expect a lot of losses. I hope I'm wrong, but I expect a lot of losses, Jermaine. Thanks for listening to the show. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air, even if you think I'm a fraud, Elizabeth. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to some news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. Some Dems fear presidency could be slipping Harris' grasp, writes the Independent Journal Review. Putin pitches challenge to Western order at BRICS summit, reports the Dispatch. Ukraine wants to join NATO. Here's why that's such a dangerous prospect, says The Hill. From The Guardian, North Carolina families scramble as 76,000 students are still out of school after Helene. And finally, Israeli airstrikes kills 3 journalists in southern Lebanon. And that is according to Democracy Now! Our first story in the world of politics this week. U.S. budget deficit tops $1.8 trillion in fiscal year 2024, the third largest on record. The U.S. budget deficit grew to $1.833 trillion for fiscal year 2024, the highest outside of the COVID era, as interest on the federal debt exceeded $1 trillion for the first time, and spending grew for the Social Security retirement program, health care, and the military, the Treasury Department said on Friday. The deficit for the year ending on September 30th was up 8% or $138 billion from the $1.695 trillion recorded in fiscal year 2023. It was the third largest federal deficit in U.S. history after the pandemic relief-driven deficits of $3.132 trillion in fiscal year 2020 and $2.72 trillion in fiscal year 2021. The sizable fiscal 2024 budget gap of 6.4% of gross domestic product, up from 6.2% a year earlier, could pose problems for Vice President Kamala Harris's arguments ahead of the November 5th presidential election that she would be a better fiscal steward than the Republican opponent Donald Trump. A fiscal think tank, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, has estimated that Trump's plans would pile up $7.5 trillion in new debt, more than twice the $3.5 trillion envisioned from Harris's proposals. White House Budget Director Shalonda Young emphasized the strong growth in the U.S. economy and the Biden administration's investments in clean energy, infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing. This administration has done this while maintaining a commitment to fiscal responsibility, by ensuring the wealthiest among us and large corporations pay their fair share, and by cutting wasteful spending on special interests, Young said in a statement, referring to plans by Biden and Harris to raise taxes on these groups. U.S. receipts for the 2024 fiscal year hit a record $4.919 trillion, up 11% or $479 billion from a year earlier, as individual non-withheld and corporate tax collections grew. Fiscal 2024 outlays rose 10% or $617 billion to $6.752 trillion. The biggest driver of this year's deficit was 29% increase in interest costs for Treasury debt of $1.113 trillion due to a combination of higher interest rates and more debt to finance. That total exceeded outlays for the Medicare health care program for seniors and for defense spending. But a senior Treasury official said the interest costs as a share of GDP reached 3.93%, below the 1991 record of 4.69%, but the highest percentage since December 1998. The weighted average interest rate on federal debt was 3.32% in September, up 35 basis points from a year earlier, but down from 3.35% from August, marking the first monthly decline since January of 22. Other drivers of increased outlays for the fiscal year included Social Security up 7%, Medicare up 4%, and military programs up 6%. For September, the government reported a $64 billion surplus compared to a $171 billion deficit in September 23, but the improvement was largely due to calendar adjustments for benefit payments. Without these, there would have been a $16 billion deficit for September of 24. Reported receipts were a record for September at $528 billion, up 13% from a year earlier, while outlays were $463 billion, down 27%, largely due to the calendar adjustments. So, contained in that article were a lot of percentages, a lot of numbers, a lot of quotes that had flowery language from people in charge of managing our nation's budget and our deficit. But don't get lost in the sauce, my people. Let me keep it a buck with you. Let me break it down. Let me give it to you straight. In only the way that we can from a backyard shed in Alabama. We are a nation who lives beyond our means. That's the truth of it. We're a nation that lives beyond our means. We're a world superpower who is writing checks that would bounce if they were cashed today, but we have enough swagger and enough influence and power on the international stage that we know those checks won't get cashed today. And we're kicking the can down the road, hoping that by the time they do, we'll have something figured out. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter is the American people. You could not run a household this way. You could not run a small business this way. But the corporation that is America is run this way, and both parties are at fault. We are upside down when it comes to our finances. It doesn't pass the smell test. It's only getting worse. When any politician, whether they are Republican or Democrat, tells you that they are going to tighten the belt and that they're going to be more fiscally responsible than the other party, hey, they're lying to you. They're lying to you. You can say that the years 2000 and 2021 were outliers and anomalies because we were in the midst of a worldwide pandemic and recovering from it, but hey, what about 2023? Explain that one to me. Tell me why our national deficit continues to balloon and swell like a tumor that's spreading cancer throughout our body. And what plan do you have to fix it? Realistically, what plan do you have to address it? Because I haven't heard one in this election cycle. I didn't hear one in the last election cycle. I didn't hear one in the election cycle before that. You know who I would vote for? You know how you would get my vote? If somebody stepped up to the podium in a debate and said, we have got to fix this for the future of our country and the generations that are coming behind us. It's time to slash budgets. It's time to reallocate funds. It's time to renegotiate deals. It's time to pay off some of our debt and call in some of our favors. We're going to get this thing under control. But they're not doing it. And they're not interested in doing it. Part of it is because of the insurmountable impact of money in politics, kickbacks and super PACs and the like. Part of it is because it's too difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube. And part of it is because we live in a culture of instant gratification. We don't think about 50 years from now. We don't think about 100 years from now. We're interested in the right here and right now. And so there's not a plan. Not really. This thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And have you heard this story reported on mainstream media or cable news channels? Have you read it in the newspaper? And you're like, newspaper? I still get a newspaper. It's delivered to my house every Sunday, okay? I'm not seeing it. I haven't seen a passing mention of our growing and ballooning deficit. It's just accepted that, hey, we owe everybody something. We're digging a hole and we can't climb out of it. So we're not going to try. Our military budget is astronomical. The Department of Defense still has never passed an audit. We're losing money in our trade deals. Manufacturing has been exported out of our country long ago. We're not energy independent. And we don't have a plan. That's the simple truth of it. We don't have a plan. It doesn't affect us right now here today, but what about our grandchildren? That might be funny coming from a man in his mid-30s, not late 30s, mid-30s, but it's something that I think about. And I wish our politicians did too. The only mention of the deficit that you often hear in election time is scare tactics and scaremongering about Social Security lacking the funding and running out of money. We need to look at the big picture. We need to consider the factors feeding into this house of cards that one day will come tumbling down in a frightening and tragic manner. I'm not trying to scare you or worry you. We're not a nation without hope, but this is a serious thing and it deserves to be talked about. And on this show, we will. Our next story in the world of politics this week, fact check, is the military overreaching. The truth behind DoD Directive 5240-01's expanded lethal authority. On September 27, 2024, the Department of Defense released an updated version of DoD Directive 5240-01, which governs the involvement of military intelligence in domestic law enforcement. This update introduces significant changes to the previous framework, most notably by expanding the conditions under which military intelligence can assist civilian law enforcement and authorizing the use of lethal force in certain emergency situations. The updated directive now clearly allows for broader military involvement in domestic law enforcement, especially under emergency conditions. While the directive primarily focuses on intelligence support, it explicitly permits military commanders to use lethal force if an imminent threat is identified. Previously, military involvement in domestic affairs was heavily restricted by the Posse Comitatus Act and other safeguards that kept the military separate from civilian law enforcement functions. However, the 2024 directive blurs these boundaries by granting military personnel the ability to intervene in specific high-risk situations, including using force before receiving direct approval from the Secretary of Defense. Commanders can act in such scenarios if they seek post-action approval within 72 hours, creating a potentially dangerous precedent. Let's take a look at some common misconceptions and clarifications around this directive. Misconception 1, the DoD has always had this authority. This claim circulated online and social media suggests that the military's authority to use lethal force in support of domestic law enforcement is nothing new. However, this assertion is misleading. While the military has always had some authority to use lethal force in certain scenarios, such as protecting DoD personnel, the 2024 update to DoD Directive 5240-01 significantly expands the circumstances in which military personnel can use lethal force domestically. The directive now allows for direct military involvement in civilian law enforcement operations under emergency conditions, including situations where there is an imminent threat. This broader scope marks a shift from previous versions of the directive. A further attempt to downplay concerns suggests that the DoD has always had the authority to use lethal force domestically, thereby implying that the 2024 update is simply a continuation of existing practices. However, this argument fails to consider the restrictions of the Posse Comitatus Act, which has long limited military involvement in domestic law enforcement without special congressional or executive authorization. While the DoD has had broad authority in foreign operations, domestic use of lethal force has been significantly more constrained. Moreover, references to the National Security Act of 1947 are also misleading. While the act restructured the military and intelligence communities, it did not grant the DoD broad domestic lethal force authority. The 2024 directive explicitly expands the military's involvement in domestic affairs, particularly by allowing military intelligence personnel to use lethal force in law enforcement scenarios. This marks a clear policy shift rather than a mere reaffirmation of past practices, highlighting another failed attempt to dismiss the real concerns about the directive's implications. Misconception number 2, it only applies to intelligence, not physical military involvement. Another common misunderstanding is that this directive is limited to intelligence support and does not authorize physical military action. While the directive's primary focus is on intelligence, this interpretation misses key details about the directive's provisions. The 2024 version clearly states that military commanders can take physical action, including the use of lethal force in cases where intelligence operations identify an imminent threat. This allows for military personnel to physically intervene in certain situations, making the directive much more than just an intelligence sharing framework. In emergency situations, commanders can act without prior approval from the Secretary of Defense, expanding the military's potential role in domestic law enforcement. The expanded military role outlined in DoD Directive 5240-01 raises significant concerns about the erosion of constitutional protections, particularly those guaranteed by the Posse Comitatus Act. The act traditionally limits the military's involvement for civilian law enforcement, requiring congressional or presidential authorization for military intervention. However, the 2024 update to the directive expands the military's role in civilian law enforcement, creating a pathway for military personnel to act in cases of national security emergencies. Critics argue that this expansion threatens the balance of power between civilian and military authorities and could lead to overreach in situations that would traditionally be handled by civilian law enforcement agencies. Moreover, the COVID-19 era saw the DHS redefine domestic threat actors to include those who question COVID-19's origins or the presumed safety or efficacy of mRNA vaccines, effectively putting dissent or expressing heterodox narratives on the same footing as threatening national security. It's within these profoundly shifting contexts that the recent DoD reissuance changes take on greater concern to the public. The expanded military powers under the directive could also be seen as a stepping stone toward greater military involvement in civilian matters, potentially leading to situations where the military bypasses constitutional safeguards intended to protect civil liberties. This update to the directive represents a significant shift in how military intelligence and lethal force can be used in domestic law enforcement scenarios. While the directive is framed as a necessary tool for national security, its expanded powers raise critical questions about constitutional protections, civilian oversight, and the potential for government overreach. As this directive continues to be scrutinized, it's essential for the public to stay informed and engage in discussion about the role of the military in domestic law enforcement. The potential for abuse of these expanded powers is real, and the implications for civil liberties should not be taken lightly. Thanks to the firestorm of activity on platforms like X and the concern of the American people, there's a growing chorus of requests for congressional inquiry into this matter. In our constitutional republic, an issue of this gravity deserves thorough examination. We encourage you to do so. So, Directive 5240. I ask you something or nothing. If you are not in the dark recesses of the interwebs, if you are not on the line, as Vince Vaughn may say, you probably have never even heard of this and do not realize that it is a thing. And I'm here to tell you that it is. I'm here to educate you, my people, my babies, my tools. I am a weapon of mass instruction, okay? If you check out any hard right-leaning news sites, they are absolutely up in arms that the American government has changed their policy and now the army can use lethal force on its own civilians. And they are calling themselves canaries in the coal mine. This is something that is dangerous and absurd, and it must be undone at all costs. And hey, I don't think that they're wholly correct. If you hear this brought up at all on the left, it is only to mock those on the right who are raising alarm bells about it. And hey, I don't think that they are wholly correct. At the risk of getting hate mail that I so often get saying, Wes, you are both siding this issue, let me say that the truth is found somewhere in the middle. Maybe in the middle of this shed, even. This is not the same policy that has always existed. This is an update to the policy. It's a new issuance. It's a change. And it's one that should at least make you perk up your ears and pay attention. Because most of us would certainly be against the continued militarization of the police. Most of us would say that there needs to be a wide gap between local law enforcement and our national army in the way that we treat those foreign actors that we are opposed to and those who are citizens of our country. And in so many ways over the years, especially since 9/11, our civil liberties have been under attack at the behest of national security. It's like a catch-all phrase. Once you throw it out there, this is for national security purposes, most people just stop paying attention and say, okay, I want to be safe. I want my country to be safe. I don't want to experience anything like what we went through on that day ever again, and I get it. By the same token, you cannot completely sacrifice liberty for the sake of safety. You just can't go there. It's a slippery slope. It is a muddy road, and there are ditches on both sides. If the wrong people are in power, if the wrong people are in charge, whoever those people might be in your estimation, this policy change could matter. It could be something that is used in a detrimental way. It does allow for expanded communication and efficiency between our intelligence agencies, our military, and our police department, which is good and positive and right. But it also is a policy update that allows for the abuse of power, that paints with too broad a brush. We don't have very many Van Goghs in elected positions, running our 3-letter agencies, heading up our military. We have a lot of finger painters and a lot of color by number people. Okay. Directive 5240 and the changes that were made do matter and should be reported about. Congress should certainly take a look. We need some guidelines, some guardrails, and more civilian oversight, no doubt. This is not the first step toward authoritarian government. It's not the end of democracy. It's not the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to our republic. But if our very divided country, where political partisanship is at an all-time high, continues to slide away from a government that is for, of, and by the people, it certainly can be misused. It certainly can do damage. I believe in our military. I support our police officers. I want our country to be safe. But I'm not willing to sacrifice liberty for the sake of safety. I'm not willing to just allow the term national security to make me bury my head in the sand and look the other way. And you shouldn't either. Our next story in the world of politics, true or not, Kamala Harris's McDonald story, a distraction from the lie about Joe Biden. Politicians lie. No two words are more reliably true. They don't just lie about politics, policy, and people. They lie about themselves most of all. Take the politician who is allegedly at the helm of our nation right now. This spring, back when every Democratic politician was telling us Joe Biden was spry enough to run again, Biden told crowds in Pennsylvania about how his uncle was eaten by cannibals after crashing on an island during World War II. Not true, says Biden's own Department of Defense. In the same speech, he claimed that he never made more than $400,000 a year, a fact that was sort of true before he left office as Barack Obama's vice president, but now is wildly untrue since he made millions on speeches and book deals while he was out of office and Donald Trump was president. So when current Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris says she worked at McDonald's, it's not unreasonable to be skeptical. Her campaign has produced no evidence beyond one friend who remembers her working there while in college. It's more than a little suspicious that she never thought to mention her work under the Golden Arches when running for Attorney General of California, and never thought to mention it when running for the Senate, both races in which her job history and biography were extensively examined. But just because a politician says something and can't prove it doesn't mean it's a lie. Harris was in college 4 decades ago. It just so happens that Harris and I have a greasy kinship as burger competitors. She was in California working the fry station, the register, and the ice cream machine at McDonald's, while I was a burger boy working the flame broiler at Burger King. I can't prove it either. I don't even remember the names of the people I worked with, let alone have any paper records of my time there. Some conservatives have demanded that Harris turn over Social Security records to prove her time as mistress of the deep fryer, but when I signed up online for mine, the records back to 1985 and 86 include how much I earned that was Social Security taxable, but not from whom I earned it. And when I was working there, it wasn't something I wanted to spread around. It was embarrassing for middle-class kids like Harris and me to be reduced to a job where you went home smelling like week-old French fries. Of course, there are no witnesses other than my mom, who regularly had to hose me off after a shift. Anyway, who cares? If the Harris McDonald's tale is false, it tells us nothing other than the fact that the vice president, who is the first woman and first person of color to hold that title, is exactly the same as every white guy who held the job before her. When it comes to lies, guilty or not, Harris is not even in the same league as the guy she's running against. He tells more and bigger lies before he gets out of bed in the morning than Harris has told in her entire career. The claim that he won the 2020 election comes to mind. The problem with the debate over Harris's familiarity with the Big Mac is that it covers up the far bigger lies she told over and over again, in which her campaign is still spreading all evidence to the contrary, and that is that Joe Biden was mentally fit to be a candidate for president, and that he's on top of the job right now. We're fighting over who's more in touch with minimum wage workers, billionaire Donald McDonald of the deep fryer photo op, or Kamala of the questionable fast food career, while the guy who is still in the White House is a few nuggets short of a Happy Meal. So, this is obviously an opinion piece, but one that I thought made a cogent argument and raised some good questions. Donald Trump, who is running for president of the United States, is a fool. And if you are offended by that, just hang in there. That one comment alone has brought Elizabeth from Ontario back on board. Donald Trump is a fool because this man is running for president as though he's a court jester or some rando on Twitter, because this was a masterclass in trolling, and it was hilarious. For reasons that only Donald Trump can explain, he has made Kamala Harris's claim that she worked at McDonald's for one summer in college as a talking point, calling it a made-up story, a false claim, and a lie, and took time out of his busy campaign schedule to go to a McDonald's in the swing state of Pennsylvania and work the fry station and the drive-thru window. And it's hilarious. It's hilarious. There are times when he is not a serious person, and those times are often. Other people who are not serious individuals are those on cable news who covered this story ad nauseum, and who raised very important journalistic points, like, hey, Donald Trump didn't actually work there, or hey, that McDonald's was not actually open for business. They actually vetted the customers that came through the drive-thru. You don't say. There have been 2 attempts on this man's life in the last few months while campaigning. Of course the inside of the McDonald's is not open to the public. Of course the Secret Service vetted those who were coming through the drive-thru and roped off the scene. Be serious. But this was just a political stunt. It was a photo op. Of course it was. And it was hilarious. I don't have any reason to doubt that Kamala Harris worked a summer job at McDonald's. If she says she did, I will take her at her word. It really does not matter at all. It doesn't affect her public perception. It doesn't convince a single undecided voter to vote for her. It means nothing. But here Donald Trump, a literal billionaire, shows up to a random McDonald's in a suit and tie, dons an apron, and works the deep fryer. He was talking about, the fries never touch a human hand. Enjoy your Big Mac. Our ice cream machine is broken. Hey, that's funny stuff. I don't care who you're voting for, that is funny stuff. And the author of this piece makes a couple of vitally important points. One is that Donald Trump is the master of distraction, because you have taken the bait, mainstream media. Rather than talk about policy, rather than talk about character or the disposition of a leader, international diplomacy, you are talking about Donald Trump working the drive-thru window at a McDonald's, and about whether Kamala Harris actually did or did not work there one summer while in college 20 plus years ago. You did exactly what Donald Trump wanted you to do, and you do it all the time. The other important point that was raised in this article is that while it doesn't matter at all whether Kamala Harris did or did not work at McDonald's, whether she was being honest or telling a lie, it does matter that for a long period of time, those surrounding President Biden who were with him day in and day out, and the journalists who covered him, continued to say that he was running circles around his counterparts, that he was more in shape than his younger staffers, that he was on top of his game, and was working harder than anyone else could possibly fathom. Hey, we saw the man at the debate. Hey, the man is 81 years old. Hey, stop it. It's not true. And I've only seen this question raised to Kamala Harris one time. I think it was by Bret Baier when she did her Fox sit down. And she didn't really give much of an answer, other than to say that she's seen him day in and day out and that he works very hard. We're not asking if he works hard. We're not talking about his career, all the things that he's accomplished over 50 years in elected positions. We're talking about right here, right now, today. You knew that this man was aging, and aging in such a way that he was no longer up to the task and up to the job, and you still refuse to admit it. Party leadership still refuses to admit it, and even a few independent journalists, and I mean truly independent journalists, have said that this is one of the greatest cover-ups in American journalism history. And we shouldn't be shocked that an 81-year-old man is not ready to do the most difficult job in the world, that he needs frequent naps and rest, and that he's at his best only for certain hours in a day. It's not shocking. It's not surprising. Imagine your grandpa running the entire country, because that's what was happening. My grandpa is the same age as Joe Biden. And I love my grandpa. He's a good man, but again, I tell you, I wouldn't put him in charge of my children for 2 hours alone, let alone the entire country. And we were lied to. And there's been no accountability about that. There's been no honesty about that. When he bombed in the debate, mainstream media and cable news pundits just went, oh my gosh, we had no idea. Hey, stop it. Stop it. I don't care whether Kamala Harris worked at McDonald's or not. I figure she probably did. It's not weird that she didn't mention it when running for office before. It's not odd that it wasn't on her resume. You don't put the job you worked in college on your resume if it's something like that. You only include the internships that you worked, the GPA that you had, the degree that you hold, and jobs that are helpful and that pertain to the position you're applying for. The more dubious claim that she makes is that she worked the ice cream machine, because we all know that they don't have ice cream machines in service, okay? And if we're going to elect somebody based on their ability to use the deep fryer, I vote for my brother-in-law, Russell, who worked at McDonald's in high school. He's an engineer now. He's a good father and husband. He's a good guy who has a level head, is compassionate, and who really was out there slinging them Big Macs, them quarter pounders with cheese. I say Russell 2024. Who's with me? Our last story in the world of politics this week. High schoolers raised $20,000 to surprise favorite custodian with new Jeep. A group of high school students from Virginia surprised their school's custodian with his dream car to show their appreciation for all he does. Students at James Madison High School learned their favorite custodian, Francis Apraku, has a special place in his heart for Jeeps, so they decided to find a way to gift him one for his birthday. With this goal in mind, students started a GoFundMe 6 months ago to raise money for Apraku's dream Jeep. They ended up with $20,000. He's more than just a custodian. He's a dear friend to us all. He's just a very kind, genuine person, one of the students said. The high schoolers cashed out the money and partnered with the local dealership to get Apraku a cherry red Jeep Wrangler just in time for the fall. They surprised the custodian with his new car on Monday. Apraku was overwhelmed with excitement and gratitude. Today is a wonderful day in my life, and I will never forget it, he said. The students say seeing Apraku's reaction to his Jeep felt incredible. I'm excited to see him whipping it around school, seeing him every day. He really deserves it, another student said. So, I thought I would end the political news segment with some good news. Every once in a while on the show, I just want to share some good news with you. There's so much going on in the world that is not as it should be. Politicians who lie and don't have the best interests of the people who elected them at heart. war all over the world, economic hardship, you name it. Too often when you tune into the news, it's nothing but bad news. And we try on this show every now and then to highlight the goodness that can be found in humanity. And this is certainly one of those stories. For all of you get off my lawn types, and I'll be honest, sometimes that's me, and the folks that want to complain about the youth today, the kids today, well, here's a group of kids that are doing something good, who use their time, their energy, their intelligence, and their resources to bless another human being because they recognize the goodness in that person, and they wanted to show their appreciation. So James Madison High School, hats off to you, to your student body, and I only hope that I have inspired some kids enough that one day I too will get my Jeep. That's all the news in the world of politics this week. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. Ref misses face mask on Darnold in Rams win over Vikings. Klay Thompson sinks 6 threes in Mavs debut. No possibility Ohtani pitches in World Series according to team manager. Kansas City Chiefs trade for wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Big 12 claims supremacy in hoops is not debatable. Michigan basketball lands top international recruit and power forward Oscar Goodman. Pacers center James Wiseman suffers torn Achilles in season opener. NC State quarterback Grayson McCall retires after multiple head injuries. Oregon State and Washington State to play twice in 2025. And finally, Kennesaw State gets first win at the Division I level, upsetting Liberty and ending their winning streak. For our first story in the world of sports, let's start with the NFL, and let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. The last remaining unbeaten team in the league, the two-time defending Super Bowl champion, with one of the best, if not the best head coaches, with the best quarterback, with one of the best defenders, and now they've traded for DeAndre Hopkins. Their offense has actually gotten off to somewhat of a slow start. Patrick Mahomes has found a way to win, but he hasn't quite looked like himself, even though they've won all of their games. They also go out big game hunting and manage to trade for one of the best wide receivers in the league, a true game changer, somebody to pair with Travis Kelce, who steps onto the field in Kansas City and becomes Patrick Mahomes' number one target on day one. And it's just nice to see a franchise so committed to winning. A franchise that prioritizes winning championships over anything else. They, even though they're undefeated, they have no losses, they don't have a blemish on their record, even though they're two-time defending Super Bowl champions, even though they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and others, they still go out and improve their roster. They still go out and add to what they already have. They're so committed to excellence that 7 games into the season, they're willing to make a trade to plug a hole, to make a position group better, and to give opposing coaches even more of a headache, to make them prepare for something else. Cowboy fans just wish that Jerry Jones had an ounce of what Kansas City has. It's a rarity. You don't always see this in sports. Teams who are winning but shake it up anyway, who find a way to go get a great player anyway. 9 times out of 10, franchises are not making this move because they're undefeated, because they already have Patrick Mahomes, because they know that if they get to the playoffs with home field advantage, it will be very tough for anybody to come in and knock them out. But the Kansas City Chiefs want to win it again. They're going for the jugular. They want a three-peat, a daunting challenge that seems impossible in the modern NFL, and yet they've got a chance. Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry look like the best team in football, but Kansas City is scarier. Kansas City is underrated even as an undefeated 2-time champion. They're waiting in the wings, and they just added to their arsenal. The other breaking story in the NFL that I want to cover this week on the show is Tua Tagovailoa's return to football at the quarterback position with the Miami Dolphins. In between recording our last episode and this week's episode, news broke that Tua would be returning. And there's a lot of speculation online, a lot of talk about the situation, a lot of opinions about what he should do or shouldn't. And I just hope he's okay. Ultimately, and obviously, this is a decision for him and for his family to make together, to be on the same page about, to consider from all angles. And I just hope that they're making a decision that they can be comfortable with, not just today, but tomorrow and 15 years down the road. This is one of those things that is bigger than football. As much as the NFL has been dragged to make improvements when it comes to player safety, kicking, and screaming, we know what the game is. It's a game that we love, but it's a game that is incredibly violent and is not safe at any level. It's just not. There was a study that came out a couple years ago that showed that head injuries as a result of impacts while playing football are just the same at the high school level as they are at college, as they are in the NFL. And on the one hand, I certainly agree with the rationale that athletes are grossly overpaid and that nobody is deserving of making the type of money that some of these guys get for playing the game, and we should pay our firefighters and our teachers, and I get it. I get the sentiment. But at the same time, the things that these guys put their body through for years is wild. How many times have we seen retired NFL players down the road who struggle to get out of bed, who struggle to walk, to talk, who struggle with mental health as a result of the physical beating that they took on the field? It's no different than what you see from a lot of retired boxers. So I know there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks out there. A lot of people who just want the guy to retire. A lot of people who are second guessing his decision. But it is his decision. And all I'll say is that I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for him to stay upright. I'm rooting for him to never get another concussion. I'm rooting for him to get to be the husband and the father and the human being full of life and vitality and freedom of movement and clarity of mind 15 and 20 years down the road that I know and I'm sure that he wants to be. But it is certainly big news. Really wasn't very surprising. When you're that elite at something, it's certainly hard to give it up. When you have that many teammates who are looking to you for leadership and whose job performance and livelihood depends on you participating and playing well, it's hard to walk away. So it wasn't really very surprising, but it's certainly news. Prayers and good vibes your way, Tua. From a War Eagle fan, I'm rooting for you. From the NFL, we go to college football for our next story, and let's take you around the SEC. Missouri topped Auburn 21-17. Florida thumped Kentucky 48-20. Tennessee beat Alabama 24-17. Texas A&M topped Mississippi State 34-24. LSU dominated Arkansas 34-10. Vanderbilt beat Ball State 24-14. And Georgia outlasted Texas 30-15. A lot going on in the SEC and a lot going on in college football. This year has been bananas. We've seen upsets. We've seen teams come from nowhere to be undefeated at this point in the season. We've seen comebacks and we've seen letdowns. And in the SEC right now, after last weekend, there are 3 fan bases that I think are feeling the letdown more than others. That's the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Auburn Tigers, and the Kentucky Wildcats. 2 of the 3 teams are teams that I root for, by the way. So I am that fan. First, the Alabama Crimson Tide and first-year head coach Kalen DeBoer, which is Spanish for the pig. I believe it's Spanish for the pig. Don't fact check me. We knew coming into the season, despite all of the talent on the roster, despite a Heisman contending quarterback returning, that Kalen DeBoer had a tall mountain to climb and a tough row to hoe. He's taking over the reins from the greatest coach ever in the sport, who put together one of the greatest dynasties that we've ever seen. And through the first 5 weeks of the season, it looked like they would not skip a beat at all. Then came a loss to Vanderbilt. A stunning loss on the road to a perennial cellar dweller in the league. They're better this year, but they are awful year after year. They had not won an SEC game in 2.5 seasons, and they beat Alabama. Alabama followed that up with a very underwhelming victory against an overmatched South Carolina team, a team that is average, that has a good defense, but really doesn't have any business scoring very many points on Alabama's defense. And South Carolina should have won that ball game. So you would think coming into this Saturday against Tennessee, one of their biggest rivals in a big matchup, a game that's been circled on the calendar, that Alabama would be focused, that they would come out guns blazing. And instead, against Bobby Hill and the Tennessee Volunteers, they looked about like they had the last 2 weeks. Something is not right with Jalen Milroe. He's not the same football player that he was the first couple games of the year, and he's not the same quarterback he was last season. And this is supposed to be Kalen DeBoer's specialty, developing a quarterback. And I think what it is I think that he is not the prototypical quarterback for a Kalen DeBoer offense. Because he's not Michael Penix Jr. He's not a superbly accurate passer of the football. He can throw a good deep ball. He's a dynamic runner. He's a tremendous athlete and a good leader, but he's not a supremely accurate passer of the football, which is what Kalen DeBoer's offense demands. And what they're not doing is they're not utilizing him enough in the run game, in my opinion. Not in scramble drill, but in called quarterback run plays and in RPOs. To my eye, it looks like Jalen Milroe is very confident and good against a man-to-man defense, but against the zone, he can get fooled. And his ball placement can get him in trouble. And it has the last 3 weeks. So the Alabama fan base, while they might have a little bit of patience left, that patience is wearing thin already. Because they're not used to losing 2 games this early in the season. And they still have to play Missouri on Saturday. They still have to play LSU. They still have the Iron Bowl where anything can happen, at least most years. And if they lose one more game, they're out of the playoffs, the expanded playoffs, the 12-team playoffs. And they've lost to 2 teams in the state of Tennessee. One that's usually awful and one that's one of their biggest rivals. Problems in Tuscaloosa right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how a first-year head coach and a new coaching staff handles it. If they can pull things out of the fire and put it back together and get this team turned around in the right direction again. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. They just look like a very talented and very undisciplined football team. That's what it looks like to me. I know I said that last week, but I'll say it again. They look like an undisciplined football team. And they can't afford another loss. Meanwhile, across the state over in God's country in Auburn, it's more of the same. It's more of the same in this dumpster fire of a season, this nightmare of a football season for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers, where apparently we're just going to have to watch Peyton Thorne line up behind center no matter what. Apparently Hugh Freeze has decided that the other quarterbacks do not give them a chance to win, and he's going to keep trotting that man back out onto the field with his mullet and his inability to read a defense. We heard for the first few weeks that if Auburn could just stop turning the ball over, hey, Peyton Thorne hasn't thrown an interception in the last 2 games, and it hasn't helped very much. They finally got Jarquez Hunter the ball against Missouri. They gave it to him 19 times instead of his 13 times on average. He was held to 56 yards rushing. And the truth is that the problems for Auburn go far beyond the quarterback position. That is certainly a problem, and a lot of fans look at it and say if we just had a good quarterback, we would be a one-loss team at this point in the season because we've been competitive in every game outside of Georgia. And I get that rationale, but I disagree. Because we've been competitive and have had leads in every game and have not been able to close out any of them. Auburn is just not a good football team. They have young talent, they show promise, they're competitive, but they're not a good football team. Somehow they're one of only 5 teams in the country to average at least 6.5 yards on offense and to average giving up 5 yards or less on defensive plays. All of the other teams are top 10 teams. And then there's the 2-win Auburn Tigers. 2-5 on the year, winless in the SEC, and if you look at their record the last 3 seasons, they've been abysmal against Division I opponents. They've been abysmal in the league. They haven't even been good at home. Auburn does have problems at the quarterback position, but they also have problems on the offensive line, especially in pass protection. They have issues on special teams, and they have issues with in-game coaching because Hugh Freeze has not put together game plans that his team has been able to execute. And he's not managed the clock very well time after time. And he's called some plays in key moments that are head-scratching to say the least. At this moment, Auburn has a top 3 recruiting class coming to the Plains next season. And that's a tremendous boon for Hugh Freeze and his program, but eventually you have to win some games on the field. You can't win 3 or 4 games at Auburn and keep your job. It just doesn't happen. His job is most likely safe this year unless they lose to Louisiana Monroe, who happens to be 5-1 on the year. But who else are they going to beat? Are they going to beat Kentucky on the road on Saturday? Are they going to be competitive in the Iron Bowl? Are they going to beat a top 15 team in Texas A&M? At this point, it doesn't look likely. Hugh Freeze has impressed me when it comes to his recruiting, but that is the only part of his job where he has looked even adequate. He hasn't been good on game day. Apparently, he hasn't been good in game prep. He has not chosen or developed quarterbacks very well so far. And he hasn't been good in press conferences. Auburn and Alabama fans at this point are sitting on their hands, feel let down, and don't have much patience left. The other fan base in the SEC that is out of patience is the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky was supposed to go into the swamp and beat Florida. Florida with a lame duck coach and a quarterback who's inexperienced, a team that has been inconsistent all season long. Kentucky that has shown that they have an elite defense in the league. And the wheels just came off. They got absolutely thumped. You can't lose that game 48-20 if you're Mark Stoops. Not at this point in your tenure, not when you have the most wins in program history, not when Texas A&M tried to hire you and change their mind, not when you make $9 million a year, not when Coach Cal moves on to Arkansas. Kentucky football should be better at this point. And they're stuck in a quagmire because they pay that man $9 million a year. And the reason that Kentucky fans are not happy with a 500 record or a losing season is because of the success that he has had and the way that he's been able to elevate that program. But they should be better. Their offense has not been good for multiple seasons in a row. They should be better. But they're not. A team that is better is the Georgia Bulldogs, who showed us on Saturday that they are who we thought they were. They went on the road and took it to Texas from the outset. They played angry. Their defense finally looked like a Kirby Smart coached bunch. They had their way with a very good Texas Longhorn team, and every time it looked like Texas was gaining some momentum, Georgia put their foot back on their neck. if you're just looking at power rankings, Georgia is one of the best 3 teams in the country, bar none. And they might be the best. Nationally, there's some interesting things happening as well. FSU loses to Duke and falls to 1-6 on the season. Yikes. Hey, maybe Mike Norvell was not a very good coach. Maybe he was not the elite coach that last season made him out to be, and you might have made a mistake by signing him to a long and lucrative extension. Maybe he just had some really good talent after some good recruiting and a quarterback that lifted them to another level. He made a bad decision in the offseason by trying to go in the portal and get a quarterback that had been inconsistent everywhere in DJU, who had shown that he was not a winner at an elite level in college football as a starting quarterback. And I don't think they're going to make a change even if they don't win a game the rest of the year because of the buyout. They're in some trouble. It's also fun that Army and Navy, 2 of the 3 Service Academy football teams, are undefeated on the season and ranked in the top 25, and I'm rooting for them to make the playoff. I'm rooting for one or either or both of them to somehow make the 12-team playoff because it would be a lot of fun. If they're anywhere near as good at fighting wars as they are this season on the football field, hey, we're going to be okay. As Kendrick said, we going to be all right. And then there's the Clemson Tigers. The Clemson Tigers, I think, are the best team in the ACC. Even though Miami has the best quarterback, maybe even in the country, and they're undefeated on the year. Even though Clemson got absolutely drubbed in the season opener against Georgia. Watch out for those Tigers. Underestimate Dabo Swinney at your own peril. The man can coach football. He doesn't do it in the modern way. He doesn't use the transfer portal. He doesn't have the same recruiting pool. Their talent level is not at the elite level it was when they were beating Alabama for national championships. But the man is a good football coach. He's entrenched at Clemson and he's built that team into a winner, and they're going to do some winning. Cade Klubnik and crew have really come on, and I think it will bear out to be true that they are the best team in the ACC. All right, let's take a look at our updated In the Shed with Wes Anderson top 25 college football rankings. At number 1, I have the Oregon Ducks. At number 2, Miami. At number 3, Penn State. And at number 4, I have Georgia. And I know I said that in power rankings, Georgia is easily a top 3 team and maybe the best team in the country. And I do believe that. But that's not how I do my rankings. When it comes to my top 25 rankings, these aren't power rankings. I'm not seeding playoff teams. On the field results matter, and Georgia has lost a game. Miami and Penn State and Oregon, who are already top 10 teams, have not, so they deserve to be ahead of them right now, in my eyes. At number 5, I have Ohio State. At number 6, Texas. At number 7, Clemson. Number 8, Tennessee. Number 9, BYU. Number 10, Indiana. Number 11, Kansas State. Number 12, Notre Dame. Number 13, Iowa State. Number 14, LSU. Number 15, Texas A&M. And at number 16, I have the Liberty Flames. Or I should say had, because obviously that will be changing. That will be changing. They lost to the Kennesaw State Owls. Be honest. You couldn't touch an owl. At number 17, I have Pittsburgh. At number 18, Army. At number 19, Navy. Number 20, Missouri. Number 21, SMU. Number 22, Boise State. Number 23, Vanderbilt. Number 24, Alabama. And number 25, the Ole Miss Rebels. And I know what you're thinking, Wes, Alabama is a lot better than 24th. Ole Miss is a lot better than 25th. And again, if we're talking about who would win a head-to-head matchup right now, of course they are. But on-the-field results have to matter at this point in the season. We've played 9 weeks of football. On-the-field results have to matter, and we still have 9 undefeated teams and 20 teams with 1 loss. You can't put these teams that have already dropped 2 games ahead of all of those schools. Vanderbilt also has 2 losses, and hey, they beat Alabama head-to-head. That's why I have Vanderbilt 23 and Alabama 24. What do you think about my top 25 rankings? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Who do you have as your top 5? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on X at intheshed4 and let us know. We're going to get to some NBA basketball, but first 3 college football games that I won't miss this weekend. And the first is Boise State at UNLV. Because with Liberty losing, with Memphis dropping 1 early in the season, Boise State is the team in best position to make the 12-team playoff as a group of 5 team. They have the Heisman frontrunner at running back. They have a team that can put up a lot of points. They can be competitive against teams with a lot more talent. But they travel to UNLV. And UNLV is a very good football team. And I'm going to be upfront and honest. I am pulling for the Rebels to defeat Boise State and to put my Army Black Knights in contention for the playoff. I want to watch that game, and I want to find out how good Boise State really is. The second game that I want to see is Notre Dame visiting Navy in Annapolis. Notre Dame comes into this game having recovered nicely from a loss to Northern Illinois, a game that they should not have dropped but did early. They're 11.5-point favorites against a top 25 and undefeated Navy squad. It's going to be very interesting. Notre Dame obviously cannot come into this game sleepwalking. They cannot turn the ball over. They cannot make mistakes. They're going to face an offense that is far different than others this season. And look, I'm not necessarily saying Navy's going to win outright. I'm not quite there. But I will be surprised, and I will be impressed if Notre Dame wins this game going away. I think it'll be closer than the spread. I've been wrong a lot lately against the spread. But give me Navy in the points. I'll be tuning in. And the last game that I won't miss this weekend is Texas visiting Vanderbilt. The same stadium that's under construction, where the goalpost got torn down when Vanderbilt defeated Alabama. And it might be the most Vanderbilt thing ever that they beat Alabama. They're ranked as a top 25 team, and they have to play Texas after a loss. It doesn't seem fair for Clark Lee and Diego Pavia and the Commodores. It doesn't seem fair. It won't be easy like a Sunday morning for these Commodores, okay? Sorry, not sorry, couldn't help it. I don't think Texas will overlook them like Alabama did. I think Texas will come into this game angry. I think Quinn Ewers will have a bounce-back game. I think Texas's defense will be on lockdown mode, and Vanderbilt very well could keep the game close, at least for 2 or 3 quarters. But I expect Texas to pull away and win. But man, it would be cool. Wouldn't it be cool if Vanderbilt could beat Alabama and Texas in the same season? Go, Diego, go. If anybody can do it, it's you, my guy. All right, before we get to the news in the world of paranormal this week, it's time for our In the Shed with Wes Anderson NBA Preview Extravaganza. Yeah, that's all our budget would allow for in the shed. We have a very modest budget of $0. Subscribe to our Patreon, please. I am so glad that the NBA season is upon us, that basketball is finally back. Basketball is my favorite sport. I love the way they dribble up and down the court. Okay. When looking at the landscape of NBA basketball this season coming into the year, I think that there are only 5 teams with the potential to win an NBA championship. 5 teams that have the roster construction, the depth, the talent, the coaching, and the culture to lift the Larry O'Brien trophy at the end of the year. And I think those teams are the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Denver Nuggets. Denver and Boston because they are champions. They've already climbed that mountain. They've already reached those heights. They have the experience, the talent, and the depth to do it again. Boston looking to repeat as champions. Nikola Jokic and Denver looking to climb that mountain again. Mike Malone will have his squad ready to go. Oklahoma City because they have been building talent and depth through the draft for years. And they have a lot of young talent, along with a star who is maybe the most underrated player in the league in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'm a buyer on Oklahoma City this year. And then there are teams like the Knicks and the Mavericks who have made off-season moves that I think put them in position to compete for it all. The Knicks, who received OG Anunoby in a trade toward the end of last season, also added 2 pieces this offseason that will make them a lot better, in Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. Normally, you may look at their roster and their lineup and say that on some nights defense would be a problem, but hey, not with the Butcher at the helm. Tom Thibodeau teams are going to play defense. You pair Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges with OG Anunoby and Jalen Brunson, and that looks a lot like an NBA Eastern Conference Finals team, if not a championship-level squad. And then you have the Dallas Mavericks that took a big leap last year with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And they made an interesting signing in the offseason by signing free agent Klay Thompson. The Mavericks do not have the top-tier talent or depth that some of these other contenders have, but they do have elite-level scorers. And they do have 2 of the top 15 players in the league on their squad. And they added one of the greatest shooters of all time who admittedly is not the player that he used to be, but who can still hit an open jump shot, who has something to prove, who broke my heart by going to another team, but who hit 6 3-point shots in his first game, scoring 22 points. If he can do that consistently for Dallas, then look out. I think Boston, New York, Oklahoma City, Dallas, and Denver are the only teams that can win it all. 5 teams that I believe in. Teams that I do not believe in this season, at least not as championship contenders. And that's the Philadelphia 76ers, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, the Phoenix Suns, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Los Angeles Clippers. I'm not buying it. I don't believe in them. The one team on that list that could prove me wrong, I think, is Milwaukee, because if you have Giannis, that is a great starting point. Damian Lillard is an amazing player, but it didn't seem to mesh well last year. And Chris Middleton was hurt for a lot of the season, and he's already out to start the season this year. Right now, I'm a seller on the Bucks. For similar reasons, I am a seller on the 76ers. I do not believe in you, Philly. I think Nick Nurse is a top-tier NBA coach, and Joel Embiid is one of the most talented players in the league for sure. But if your 2 best players are Joel Embiid and Paul George, I don't believe in you. Because the most important ability is availability, and those guys are not available. You cannot count on them to be there when you need them. They're too injury prone, they take too many nights off. It's already been announced that Joel Embiid will not play back-to-back games. And his greatness in his career and his standing in the pantheon of all-time NBA greats is at risk, not just because of his injuries, but because of load management. Because he sits out games that he could play, he misses games for minor injuries that other players would push through. He shows up out of shape. He's gassed in the fourth quarter of playoff games year after year. I don't want him as my best player. I don't believe in the 76ers. I don't think the Heat or the Clippers have enough. And I know that Anthony Edwards is one of the rising stars in the league. He's a phenomenal player. In some ways, they might actually get better by getting rid of Karl Anthony Towns and giving Anthony Edwards the unquestioned position as the number one and the top dog on that team, but I just don't think that they will be championship contenders. And I feel the same about the Phoenix Suns as well. Kevin Durant is one of the most lethal scorers in NBA history. Bradley Beal is a very good NBA player. Devin Booker is a bucket night after night and has improved on the defensive end. But who else y'all got? Who else did y'all add? Where's your quality depth? I still don't think it's there. I don't believe in the 76ers, the Bucks, the Heat, the Suns, the Timberwolves, or the Clippers. I'm selling. There are two teams that I think will be very interesting for different reasons this season. The first is my Golden State Warriors. The Warriors had a very Golden State offseason, a very Bob Myers-esque offseason. They added pieces that fit what they're trying to do under head coach Steve Kerr and Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield and DeAnthony Melton. They definitely improved. Their roster got deeper and better. They added shooting. They might be a better shooting team this season all around without Klay Thompson because of who they added in the offseason. But they also did not add any size or depth at the center position. And this was their downfall last year. They couldn't rebound with the better teams in the league. They couldn't protect the paint. They gave up too many second chance baskets. They were undersized and couldn't match up with the better teams that they faced down the stretch. And unfortunately, I think that will probably prove to be true again. They're going all in on the three ball. They shot a lot of threes in the preseason. They hit a lot of threes in the preseason. Buddy Hield scored 22 points for them in his Golden State debut. He can be a huge piece for them this year. Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody and Brandon Podziemski are all back again. They're going to have to carry more weight. The hope is that Andrew Wiggins will return to form. They still have Steph Curry. They still have Steve Kerr. And they still have Draymond Green, who picked up a technical foul in his first game, of course. About tired of that. I think that they will be improved. I think that they have a chance to make noise in the Western Conference, but I don't think that they will be elite because they don't have any size. But they'll be interesting to watch. The other team that will be interesting to watch is the Los Angeles Lakers. They always are in general, but especially since they have gotten LeBron. Especially since they have gotten Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis, who is their best player and is as consistent as I am thin. And I'm a skinny man, okay? That man will score 39 and have 16 rebounds and 7 assists, and the next night score 4 points. You can't count on him. Charles Barkley calls him street clothes, because if you give him a Paddington Bear hard stare, he's out for 3 to 4 games. LeBron James is like 47 years old. Somehow he's still a top 15 player in the league. And he's playing with his son, which is incredible. Whatever you think about Bronny James or his prospects as an NBA player, the fact that father and son are on the same team, on the same roster, already took the court together it's incredible. And Bronny will be bouncing back and forth between the Lakers and the G League, and he needs some G League playing time. He's not ready as an NBA player. He shouldn't be in their lineup. But it's still incredible. Somebody that will be in their lineup is Dalton Knecht from Tennessee. He was one of the best players in college basketball last year. The Lakers stole him in the draft as 17th overall. And I think he's going to be a knockdown shooter for them. Even as a rookie, he'll be on the court. The Lakers will be an interesting team to watch. They could finish anywhere from as high as 5th in the Western Conference if everything went right, to barely making the play-in if things don't go well. The Warriors and the Lakers will be very interesting for different reasons. And then the team that I have as being a team to watch this year, a team on the rise, the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans, who traded for DeJounte Murray from the Hawks. They have Brandon Boston Jr., who I think will have a breakout year. They have the reliable C.J. McCollum and Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, who is an underrated scorer in the league. They have some good pieces off the bench like Jose Alvarado and Daniel Theis. But really it all comes down to Zion. Is he in shape? Is he healthy? Can he stay healthy? If he can, then look out. If he can, then the Pelicans may surprise you and be a top 4 team in the Western Conference. Remember that I said it. If Zion can stay healthy. So those are my thoughts on the NBA season. That's how I see things with the first couple games of the season under our belt. That's who I think can compete for a championship. Those are the teams that I don't believe in, the ones that I think are interesting, and the team that I see as being a team on the rise. What do you think? Who do you think will win the NBA championship this year? Who do you believe in? Who do you doubt? What team do you have as a sleeper and a surprise team this year? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4 and get your picks in while the season is young. This has been our In the Shed with Wes Anderson NBA preview. Extravaganza! That's all the news this week in the world of sports. Let's switch to this. The news in the world of the paranormal. Where our first story takes us to the world of cryptozoology. Yeah, my babies. We going into a field that has a bunch of things that might be real but also might not. Because what else do you expect when you tune in to In the Shed with Wes Anderson? 10 most famous cryptids in the world. Number 10, Mokele Mbembe. Mokele Mbembe is a cryptid said to inhabit the Congo River basin in Africa. Often described as a living dinosaur similar to a sauropod, it's reported to be up to 10 meters long with a long neck and tail. Local legends have spoken of Mokele Mbembe for generations, and numerous expeditions have sought to find evidence of its existence, yet it remains elusive. And we covered this one back on the show when my daughter was like 4 years old in our first several batches of episodes, and she pronounced it pretty well, if I must say so myself. A dinosaur hiding in the Congo, in the jungles. Are dinosaurs really extinct? Or is Mokele Mbembe out there just wandering around, elusive as ever? Number 9, the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird is a cryptid from Native American mythology, described as a massive bird capable of creating storms and thunder with the beating of its wings. Sightings of unusually large birds have been reported across North America, particularly in the Midwest. The Thunderbird remains an enduring symbol in various Native American cultures and continues to be a topic of interest among cryptozoologists. And it's one that I find very interesting, I agree. A lot of crossover between Thunderbird sightings and what people label as Mothman sightings. I don't think that they are the same thing, but very interesting nonetheless. Number 8, the Kraken. Unleash the Kraken! We're having fun. The Kraken is a legendary sea monster from Scandinavian folklore, said to dwell off coasts of Norway and Greenland. This enormous creature is often depicted as a giant octopus or squid capable of dragging entire ships into the depths of the ocean. The Kraken has been a staple of sailors' tales for centuries and continues to feature prominently in popular culture, such as in the Pirates of the Caribbean films, or Pirates of the Caribbean films, whichever one you prefer. The Kraken is one I've always thought was very interesting, and it's something that I could definitely see being real to an extent. There is over a century's worth of eyewitness testimony and written reports, and we don't really know what's in the ocean. It is the most unexplored place that there is, including outer space. I digress. Number 7, Bunyip. The Bunyip is an aquatic cryptid from Australian Aboriginal mythology. Descriptions vary, but it's often depicted as a large creature with a dog-like face. flippers, and a horse-like tail. The bunyip is said to inhabit swamps, billabongs, and riverbeds. Stories of this creature have been passed down through generations, and it remains a significant part of Aboriginal culture. And this is my first time hearing of the bunyip. Never heard of it before, and the picture and the description is hideous. Just hideous. Number 6, the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a legendary creature said to inhabit the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. According to folklore, it has the head of a horse, wings like a bat, and hooves. Tiny hooves. The article does not say, in fact, that the hooves are tiny. I just added that because it's my show and my shed and I can. I digress. The origin story dates back to the 18th century, involving a local woman named Mother Leeds who cursed her 13th child to be born as a devil. Since then, there have been numerous sightings and reports of eerie screeches echoing through the forests. And I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by that at all. The Pine Barrens of New Jersey is a massive forest system. You don't think of forest when you think of New Jersey, but it is a forest that is very deep and somewhat impenetrable, and at parts hard to navigate in. So I'm sure you hear some interesting sounds when out there. Don't know how much stock I put in the lore of the Jersey Devil, but if there is a place where there would be something unexpected, other than Florida, it would be in New Jersey. Number 5, the Yeti. The Yeti, or abominable snowman, is a cryptid said to inhabit the Himalayan mountains. Similar to Bigfoot, it's described as a large bipedal ape-like creature, often depicted with white fur. Stories of the Yeti date back centuries, and it remains a figure of intrigue of both locals and explorers alike. Despite numerous expeditions and alleged evidence, conclusive proof of the Yeti's existence has yet to be found. Or maybe it has yeti to be found. Yeti. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, the Yeti is definitely one of my favorites. It fits in the Bigfoot and Sasquatch family. And it makes sense that if something is in the Himalayas, that it would be hard to find it. Number 4, Mothman. Mothman is a winged humanoid creature reported in Point Pleasant, West Virginia during the late 1960s. Witnesses describe Mothman as a tall figure with large wings and glowing red eyes. The creature was linked to the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967, leading to speculation about its role as a harbinger of disaster. And in my opinion, that is a misnomer, but I digress. The legend of Mothman inspired a book and a film titled The Mothman Prophecies. Yeah, one of my personal favorites. I hope to one day go, maybe next year, to the Mothman Festival. I'll meet you there in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is like 30 miles from where my grandpa grew up and where he lives today. The Mothman. Number 3, Chupacabra. The Chupacabra, meaning goatsucker in Spanish, is reported mainly in Latin America. This cryptid allegedly attacks livestock, drinking their blood. Descriptions vary, with some depicting it as a reptilian creature with spines along its back, while others describe a more dog-like appearance. First reported in Puerto Rico in the 1990s, the Chupacabra has since become a part of modern folklore. And the Chupacabra is something that we definitely have covered on this show, and one of the more interesting cryptids in the sense that every few years, pictures pop up on the internet that the Chupacabra has finally been discovered, but usually it's just a mangy dog is usually what it is. Number 2, the Loch Ness Monster. The Loch Ness Monster, affectionately known as Nessie, supposedly resides in Scotland's Loch Ness. Descriptions vary, but it's often depicted as a large, long-necked creature with one or more humps protruding from the water. The first recorded sighting dates back to 565 AD, but Nessie gained worldwide fame after a photograph taken in 1934, known as the surgeon's photograph, which was later debunked as a hoax. Or was it? Or was it? I'll let you decide, my babies. Nessie was the first cryptid that I ever took an interest in. I remember getting a book from the library at school when I was in like the 5th grade about the Loch Ness Monster, the Bermuda Triangle, and spontaneous human combustion. And the rest is history. The rest is history. And number one, of course, Bigfoot. Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, is one of the most famous cryptids in North America. This large, hairy, ape-like creature is said to inhabit forests, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. Witnesses reported it as being over 2 meters tall. And why are we doing meters? We don't do meters here, okay? This is America. We like our cheese American. We say the Pledge of... Anyway, with footprints that are over 60 centimeters, here we go again, long. Despite numerous sightings and even alleged video, we'll get to that later, Bigfoot remains elusive. So, wanted to do this story. I get requests all the time on the show to do more cryptids. That's how the show started, that we haven't been doing that. We've been doing a whole lot of aliens and UFOs, which we're about to get to next, by the way. And so I wanted to include this story. It came across my desk, the top 10 most famous cryptids. How many of these have you heard of? Are you familiar with all 10? I was familiar with 9 out of 10. Which one is your favorite? Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, Mothman, Yeti, the Jersey Devil, Bunyip, the Kraken, Thunderbirds, or Mokele Mbembe? Which one do you think is most likely to be real? Which ones are there actually evidence for, and which ones do you throw out altogether? Email the show and find us on Twitter at InTheShed4. I would love to hear your opinions on these, and I would love to read them on my show. From cryptozoology, we go to UFOs for our next story. Survey reveals 68% of UFO believers think government withholds significant information. A recent survey we conducted has revealed that a substantial 68% of those who believe UFOs exist think the government is withholding significant information regarding UFOs and extraterrestrial life. Overall, 70% of responders believe in the existence of UFOs. Given our focus on paranormal topics, it's important to note that our audience might have a higher inclination towards believing in UFOs than the general population. The survey found that 70% of participants believe in the existence of UFOs, with the majority attributing these phenomena 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 to extraterrestrial origins. Another 22% think UFOs exist but believe they can most likely be explained by natural or human-made phenomena. I already did the song. A small fraction of the respondents, 5%, do not believe in UFOs, and 3% remain uncertain. Among those who believe in UFOs, a significant portion, 68%, are convinced that the government is withholding substantial information regarding their existence and of extraterrestrial life. Only 25% think that some information is disclosed, and a mere 3% believe the government is transparent about its knowledge. And I'm not very sure the government is transparent about anything. Call me Fox Mulder. I digress. About 6% of respondents are unsure about the level of government disclosure. When asked about personal UFO sightings, 27% of respondents reported witnessing a UFO and are convinced it was of extraterrestrial origin. Another 32% have seen a UFO but are unsure of its origin altogether. Interestingly, 35% of participants have never witnessed a UFO. Neither have I. While 5% have not seen one themselves but know someone who has. The credibility of UFO sightings reported in the media varies among respondents. While 14% find these accounts very credible, a majority, 62%, consider them somewhat credible. However, 19% think that these reports are not very credible, and 5% deem them not credible in the least. The belief in alien visitation is strong, with 61% of participants convinced that aliens have visited Earth and interacted with humans. Another 17% believe aliens have visited but have not made contact with us at all. Meanwhile, 11% are unsure if aliens have visited Earth, and another 11% do not believe in such visits. If conclusive evidence of extraterrestrial life were found, 31% of respondents think society should react with open acceptance and attempts to communicate. A larger portion, 47%, advocate for caution and extensive scientific research. A smaller group, 8%, suggest a skeptical and defensive stance, while 14% are unsure of how to respond appropriately. Engagement with UFO and alien-related content is relatively high among respondents. About 36% engage very often, and 56% do so occasionally. A smaller percentage engage rarely, 6%, or never, 3%. Interest in UFO and alien visitation theories varies, with 31% of respondents deeply interested and actively researching the topic. A majority of 53% are moderately interested and occasionally follow updates. Some 14% are mildly curious but not actively engaged, and a small fraction, 3%, are not interested at all. Regarding the 2023 U.S. government congressional hearings on unidentified aerial phenomena, half of the respondents, 50%, found the hearings provided some useful information but left many questions unanswered. Another 22% felt the hearings were not very helpful, and 19% were not aware or did not follow the hearings. The testimonies of the 3 military whistleblowers about their experiences with UAPs were interpreted as credible and indicative of extraterrestrial activity by 39% of respondents. Another 22% found the testimonies credible but not necessarily extraterrestrial in nature. A small group of 11% believed the whistleblowers could be mistaken or misrepresenting their experiences, while none of the respondents deemed the testimonies untruthful. About 25% are not familiar with the testimonies at all. The survey highlights a strong belief in the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrial life among our readers. Many have witnessed or know someone who has witnessed a UFO, and there's a prevalent opinion that the government is withholding significant information on the subject. So, I thought this was a survey that was worth sharing on the show. A lot of numbers, a lot of percentages. The two that stuck out to me the most, however, were that 68% of respondents believe that the government is withholding significant amounts of information about the subject matter. And that would not have been the case even a decade ago. Used to, you would get laughed out of the building and labeled a nut for talking about UFOs, and now it's covered on mainstream media and cable news. The landscape has changed. It's something that you can talk about openly. It's something that it's pretty well accepted that there are things in the skies that are being seen that we do not know what they are. And no matter what they are, one thing that we're pretty certain of is that the government knows more than they are sharing. And sharing is caring. U.S. government. It's time to show us that you care. And the other statistic from this survey that stuck out to me was the fact that 0% of respondents found the testimony given at the congressional UAP hearings to be untruthful. That's stunning. That's shocking information. That 0%, not one person responded to this survey, said, I think those guys made it up. I think those guys are lying. I think it's a hoax. I think they're full of it. That's surprising, and it's pretty cool. This topic and this phenomenon have come a long way, and I think we're just getting started. From UFOs to bumblebees, we go for our next story, because of course we do. Why wouldn't we? From cryptozoology to UFOs to bumblebees, because nobody covers the animal kingdom like we do from a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Stressed bees make pessimistic choices and may experience emotion-like states, new research suggests. Stressed bees are much more likely to make pessimistic choices and lack a buzz in life. Come on. You did that on purpose and you know it, and you should be ashamed, but I enjoyed it anyway. New research has revealed. Scientists at Newcastle University in the UK, where we have many listeners. The UK is number 4 right now when it comes to percentage of our listening audience. Hello, UK. Maybe some of you are listening from Newcastle University right now, where they study the bees. I digress. Have found that bumblebees have a response to an adverse event resembling human emotions. Findings published in Proceedings of the Royal Society B showed that bees reduce their expectations of reward when they're agitated, and this could impact how they approach and pollinate flowers. Researchers trained bees to decide whether a color signaled something good or bad. And that's impressive. If you're training a bee to do literally anything, I think that's impressive. Bees learned to identify that different colors were associated with different outcomes, with one color associated with a sweet reward location and another color indicating a location that had a much lower reward. Bees learned the difference and visited the appropriate location when shown each color. And they can already do something that I cannot, because I am, in fact, a colorblind individual. I suffer from color blindness, and I could not do the same test that these bees were trained to do. Once bees learned these associations, 2 groups experienced a simulated predatory attack, and a 3rd group did not experience any external stress. The bees who had experienced the attack were found to be much less likely to interpret ambiguous colors as indicating higher rewards, and in response visited low reward locations more often than the control bees. Dr. Vivek Nityananda, who has a great name, from Newcastle University said, "Our study shows that bees are more pessimistic after stress, as their behavior suggests they do not expect to get rewards. Emotions are complex states in humans and involve a subjective understanding of what you're feeling. We might never know if bees feel something similar. However, what this research can say is that bees have similar responses when they're stressed and make pessimistic choices. The best explanation for their behavior is that they expect higher rewards to be less likely and exhibit traits of pessimistic people. Scientists say the research is important as it means stress can impact how bees approach flowers and pollinate plants, as well as their ability to access high-quality rewards. And to sting us, maybe. Maybe even to sting us. I digress. The results also show that we can find emotion-like responses in very different animals, including insects. The bees in the study were stressed by shaking or being trapped by a robotic arm with a sponge. And that is stressful. If I got trapped by a robotic arm with a sponge, I would be stressed. Dr. Olga Prasenko led the research at Newcastle University and is now a researcher at the University of Birmingham. She said, "Our research suggests that like other animals, including humans, bees may experience emotion-like states when stressed, as demonstrated by a clear shift towards pessimism. When faced with ambiguity, stressed bees, much like someone seeing the glass as half empty, are more likely to expect negative outcomes. Besides suggesting that states akin to emotion may be evolutionarily conserved, our study opens up new possibilities for understanding how stress affects insect cognition and behavior, which could provide insights into their responses to environmental challenges and inform conservation efforts. Further research is needed to understand what the exact implications are for the pollination of flowers and plants." Dr. Nityananda added, "We need to figure out how bees evaluate rewards when stressed and whether these states in bees show other properties we see in emotions. We also need to investigate the neural mechanisms involved and see if bees in the wild show similar responses." So, as it turns out, bees may in fact have emotions. They may have emotions. And now knowing this and thinking about all the bees that I have crushed over the years, it really stings. I couldn't help it. It turns out that the Bee Movie was a documentary. Some bees are glass half full bees out here making pessimistic decisions because of the stress that they face and have to carry on their little wings as they buzz around. And I just want to tell them, be happy. This study is pretty interesting and pretty neat. I thought it was worthwhile to share on the show. Bees are able to be trained to do all kinds of things. I remember learning years ago about a program where bees were trained to find drugs. I don't know if they sniff, but they essentially had drug-sniffing bees. And they were very much more accurate in finding drugs than are drug dogs. It's crazy. Nature is wild. Creation is wild. In the UK, they're out here training bees to recognize colors. Train me to recognize colors. Fly me to the UK, and I'll show you some pessimism, when as a grown man, I cannot play Uno without a partner. That induces some pessimistic decision-making, let me tell you. Bees may have feelings, and they react similarly to people when they are stressed. Very interesting stuff indeed. From bees in the UK to California we go for our last story this week. The true story of the Patterson-Gimlin film that some say proves Bigfoot is real. In October 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin captured a furry bipedal creature ambling across the banks of Bluff Creek, California. Though shakily shot on a 16mm camera and barely a minute long, the Patterson-Gimlin film transformed the myth of Bigfoot into an immovable cornerstone of modern American culture. Though the legend of Bigfoot had existed for centuries before Patterson and Gimlin's encounter, with several indigenous tribes across the northwestern cultures having orally passed along tales of ape men in the woods, no one had captured it on film. To this day, the Patterson-Gimlin film remains one of the most scrutinized recordings in modern American history, with experts of all stripes failing to debunk it entirely. It was October 20th, 1967, and Bob Gimlin found himself half a day's ride from any signs of civilized life. The 36-year-old Missourian had bumped into his eccentric old friend Roger Patterson at a gas station in Union Gap, Washington, mere days earlier. Patterson was a devout Bigfoot chaser who had just self-published Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist? In the summer of 1967, Patterson also began filming a pseudo-documentary about cowboys, an old miner, and an indigenous American tracker on the hunt for Bigfoot. When he ran into Gimlin, he told him about the film and added that he had heard about a set of unidentifiable footprints that were found in Northern California. He asked Gimlin to saddle up and help him find the beast responsible. Part rodeo man, part daredevil, Gimlin agreed and soon found himself on a horse in Bluff Creek. On that fateful day, Patterson rode ahead of him with the reins of his horse in one hand and a 16mm Cine Kodak camera in the other. Then, just after Patterson put the camera back in his saddlebag, the horses began to whinny, and the pungent stench of skunk filled the air. The horses kicked in fear, and the two cowboys spotted a massive 6 to 7 foot beast walking about 25 to 100 feet away from them. "Bob, cover me," Patterson shouted as he dismounted and grabbed his camera. After a short dash, he crouched to stabilize his shot and began recording. Gimlin was right behind him and drew his rifle. The men watched as the creature looked around to give a now infamous glance at the camera and walk off. The Bigfoot sighting lasted only 59.5 seconds, but it caused a lifetime of trouble for Gimlin. The men hurried back to their campsite to take plaster casts of the prints they found. Then they rode on to a variety store about 30 miles from Bluff Creek, where they intended to ship off their film to Patterson's brother-in-law. Patterson called the Times Standard newspaper in Eureka to describe his encounter and began a worldwide journey of showcasing his film as evidence of the existence of Bigfoot. Wherever Patterson showed the footage, a stir followed. Skeptics accused him of forgery and claimed that Patterson staged the entire incident because he was unable to find proper financing for his other Bigfoot projects. The infamous footage did admittedly make him a good chunk of cash. Indeed, Patterson was able to make a deal with the BBC to buy rights to use his Bigfoot footage. Many dismissed the film as a prank featuring a man in an admittedly impressive costume, and it didn't help that a costume designer named Philip Morris claimed in 2002 that he sold Patterson the ape-man costume used in the film. Just a few years prior to Morris's claim, a man named Bob Hieronymus of Yakima, Washington said that Patterson hired him to wear the costume, and that he showed the suit to a few friends at a Yakima bar before Patterson and Gimlin came to retrieve it. Additionally, Patterson and Gimlin's own accounts are littered with inconsistencies. Patterson said he filmed the creature around 1 p.m., rode back to get casting material for the footprints, returned to the site to cast them, rode back to the car, and drove to Eureka to mail the footage. This seems impossible to do before 6 p.m. like Patterson said. Gimlin's story meanwhile runs contradictory to that of Hieronymus's. Gimlin was either kept in the dark about plans of a hoax or was a key part of it. He remained adamant, however, that what he saw in 1967 was a living, breathing creature. Of course, this wouldn't have been the first time that a fake Bigfoot encounter made the news. In 1958, Northern California's Humboldt Times reported on the discovery of a bizarre 16-foot-inch footprints near Bluff Creek. The article even coined the Bigfoot moniker, but then it was revealed in 2002 that local Ray Wallace planted the prints as a prank. But the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage has never been truly debunked. Everyone from special effects artists, forensic experts, and costume designers to pseudoscientists and acclaimed primatologists have analyzed the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage. For primatologist Jeffrey Meldrum, the footage is a clear-cut case of viewers overthinking what they've seen. The Idaho University professor of anatomy and anthropology claims to be as confident as I can be short of standing on the sandbar with Roger and Bob that the creature captured on the film was real. Meldrum compared the texture of the fur and muscle definition with that of costly Hollywood productions. He described the characters in the Planet of the Apes as big hairy Pillsbury doughboys in comparison to the granular detail of the furry beast shown in the Patterson-Gimlin film. Meldrum's students are purportedly in agreement with him. My anatomy students start at the head, and they can see the trapezius, they can see the deltoid, erector spine down the back, shoulder blades moving under the skin, he said. The quads contract when they're supposed to contract. Former director of the Smithsonian's primate biology program, John Napier, however, pushed back against these assertions. He pointed at the sagittal crest on the creature's head as a sign that it likely was not a real creature, and that the hourglass shape of the footprints further suggests as much. There's little doubt that the scientific evidence taken collectively points to a hoax of some kind, he said. The creature shown in the film does not stand up to well-functioned analysis. He concluded, it was a brilliantly executed hoax, and the unknown perpetrator will take his place with the great hoaxers of the world. Nonetheless, Napier himself is a believer in Bigfoot. Ultimately, it's unlikely the mystery will ever be put to bed. Patterson himself passed a lie detector test given by a reputable New York polygraph expert in 1968. He never wavered from his account, even on his deathbed at 38 years old. Gimlin has never wavered from his story either. He tells it vividly and even said that he rued the day that brought him and his family so much toxic fame. Patterson had allegedly squeezed him out of any profits when he took the footage on tour. Gimlin ultimately sold his ownership share of the film for less than $10. The idea of Bigfoot, meanwhile, has taken on a life of its own. While it appears to be folklore to some, even esteemed primatologists like Jane Goodall are open to the idea. Until the legend of Bigfoot itself has been proven, the authenticity of the Patterson-Gimlin film will remain hotly contested itself. So, what do you make of the Patterson-Gimlin film? The only film that I can think of that has been viewed and analyzed by more people in America is the JFK Zapruder film. Other than that, this might be the most analyzed piece of footage, 59.5 seconds long. I've always had very mixed feelings about the Patterson-Gimlin film, because when I just watch it, it looks like a very bad costume to me. And I know that I have just made some enemies in the Bigfoot world, but to me, in the year 2024, someone that has grown up in a world with really good special effects and who watches CGI-filled and AI-written movies these days, it just doesn't even look like a very good costume. However, I do hear people like Jeff Meldrum, who I have a lot of respect for. I've read the book that he wrote, Bigfoot Legend Meets Science. He is a legitimate scientist, and he is convinced that it is real. And I've told you I want Bigfoot to be real, even aside from whether I think it is 51-49 split. The Patterson-Gimlin film is a whole different issue. The muscle definition in the video is something. That is the one thing that is kind of convincing. Patterson is not convincing. He doesn't even seem like he was a very good guy. Gimlin I have a lot of sympathy for. I've watched videos of him recounting, and it's clear that he believes what he saw. I don't know what to think. If I had to guess, I would say that it was not real, that it was a hoax. That it was somebody in a costume, and that because of technology in the day, because of the film itself, maybe it appeared to be more real than in fact it actually was. It does not even look like what I would imagine a Bigfoot would look like, but hey, We've never found a body. We've never recovered one, so maybe that's exactly what they look like. I don't know. I'm not an expert, certainly in primatology. I'm not an expert in film. If I had to make an uneducated guess and put a percentage on it, I would lean towards 60% fake and 40% real, but that's just me. It's certainly an interesting piece of film, one that is famous, if not infamous, one that you have a pretty even 50-50 split, even in the Bigfoot world, between, hey, this is completely real and is the best video evidence that we have to know this was a total hoax. And personally, I've seen some pieces of film that I think are better more recently than the Patterson-Gimlin film. It could be real, but I just don't think that it is. What is your opinion? Is the Patterson-Gimlin film authentic? Did they get video evidence that Bigfoot is real? Or was it a hoax? Does it look like a costume to you? Or was it convincing? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on X at intheshed4. And let me know what you think. I would love to hear your opinion about this famous piece of Bigfoot evidence. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 81. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Join our membership club at patreon.com/intheshed4. Look for us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on X at InTheShed4 and subscribe to our YouTube channel at In The Shed with Wes Anderson 6670. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some sports, and find out together what was found in Ben Franklin's basement. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scouts. Meemaw, we made it!
We sure did.